My name is Dex Holt, and I want to tell you something about power. Real power is not the ability to make people do what you want. Any force large enough can do that. Real power is the ability to make people want what you want, to make them believe that your direction is the right one, to walk into a room where everything is against you and leave having changed the shape of the room. I did not know I had that kind of power until the day I walked into a room where the most powerful being in the outer systems was waiting for me, and everything was very much against me. Her name was High Sovereign Voss Erin, and she ruled the Valdorian Compact, is the two, which was the largest single governing authority in the Outer Belt, spanning 14 systems and administering a population of billions across species and stations and colonies that had been under Valdorian governance for over a century. She had never been told no. I learned this from the briefing I was given 3 hours before I was taken to meet her, which was the kind of briefing that contains information you would have preferred to have considerably earlier. The briefing officer, which was the kind of briefing that contains information you would have preferred to have. A Kathiran diplomat named Orin, who had the expression of someone who had drawn a short straw, told me that the High Sovereign had requested a meeting with a human representative in connection with the Outer Belt Cooperation Agreement that my assignment was technically a part of. He told me the meeting was not optional. He told me she had never in 30 years of rule been refused anything she had formally requested. He told me to be respectful and careful and to agree to whatever she asked if it was within any reasonable interpretation of the cooperation agreement. Then he told me what she was going to ask. I listened to all of it, and I sat quietly for a moment, and then I told him that I understood the situation, and I was ready for the meeting. He looked at me with the expression of someone who had expected a different response. I did not give him a different response. I did not give him a different response, because the response I had given him was the accurate one. I did understand the situation. I was ready for the meeting. What I had not told him was that I had already decided what my answer to her request was going to be, and that the answer was no, and that I had thought about it carefully enough that I was not going to change it. The meeting room was everything a meeting room looks like when it belongs to someone who has never been told. No. Large and precise, and designed to make the person sitting across the table feel the full weight of who they were sitting across from. High Sovereign Voss Erin sat at the far end of a table that was longer than my quarters, with 2 senior advisors behind her and the kind of stillness that belongs to people who have learned that stillness itself is a form of authority. She was exactly as the briefing had described. Tall, copper-skinned, with gold eyes that held 30 years of decisions and the particular quality of someone who had made all of them without doubt. She looked at me across the table and I looked back at her. She did not waste time. She told me what she wanted in 3 sentences. The Outer Belt Cooperation Agreement included a provision for shared intelligence on patrol operations in the Outer Dravosi Zone. She wanted that provision expanded to include full access to human outer colony communication networks in the zone. In exchange, the Valdorian Compact would provide increased patrol coverage for human colony stations in sectors where human patrol authority was currently insufficient. It was a reasonable-sounding offer. It was not a reasonable offer. I had read the cooperation agreement thoroughly, the same way I read everything, and I understood what full access to human outer colony communication networks meant in practical terms. It meant the Valdorian Compact would have visibility into every communication between every human colony in the Outer Dravosi Zone, which was not an intelligence-sharing arrangement, it was a surveillance architecture. And the difference between those two things was significant enough that I had known my answer before I walked into the room. She finished her 3 sentences and waited. I took a breath. Then I said no. The room did not change visibly. The 2 advisors behind her did not move. High Sovereign Voss Erin did not change her expression, but something in the quality of the stillness shifted, the way stillness shifts when it has just encountered something it did not expect. She asked me to explain my reasoning. I explained it, clearly and completely, the way I explained things when I wanted them to be understood. Rather than just heard, I told her what the request actually meant in operational terms, the distinction between intelligence sharing and surveillance architecture, the implications for human colony governance, and the specific provision in the cooperation agreement that defined the limits of the intelligence sharing arrangement she was seeking to expand. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if I was refusing on behalf of the human outer colonies or on my own authority. I told her I was refusing because it was the right answer, and that I was confident the human outer colonies would arrive at the same conclusion if asked, but that I did not need to verify that to give her my answer today. She looked at me with those gold eyes that had 30 years of decisions in them. She said that no one had refused a formal request from her in 30 years. I said I understood that, and that I was not refusing to be difficult. I was refusing because the request was not the right shape for the relationship. She said she wanted to build with the human outer colonies, and that a relationship built on surveillance was not a partnership. It was an arrangement, and arrangements ended when they stopped being convenient. She was quiet for a long time. One of her advisors leaned forward and said something quietly, and she raised one hand slightly, and the advisor was quiet again. She looked at me steadily. She asked what I thought the right shape for the relationship was. I had thought about this too, because if you were going to say no to something, you should be ready to say yes to something better, and I had spent the transit to this meeting thinking about what better looked like. I told her. Genuine intelligence sharing, defined clearly with specific categories and mutual obligations on both sides. Patrol coverage expansion in exchange for human colony participation in the Outer Zone Monitoring Network as contributors rather than subjects. A joint technical working group on the communication infrastructure that was actually causing the patrol coverage gaps she was trying to address. Because the real problem was not information access, it was signal architecture, and that was a solvable engineering problem. If both sides worked on it, she listened to all of it with the full weight of her attention. Then she asked me one question. She asked how long I had been in my current posting. I told her 4 months. She asked who had briefed me on the cooperation agreement. I told her I had read it myself. She asked if anyone had told me what she was going to request before I came into this room. I told her yes, 3 hours before the meeting. She asked if I had prepared my alternative proposal in those 3 hours. I told her I had prepared it on the transit, which was about 40 minutes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said thing that I had not expected. She said the 3 previous representatives who had met with her regarding the cooperation agreement had all agreed to versions of what she had asked for today. She said she had assumed the 4th meeting would go the same way. She said she had not expected to spend 40 minutes of her schedule being told no by a human field technician on a 4-month posting. I did not say anything because I was not sure what the right response to that was. Then she said that the alternative proposal I had outlined in the last 10 minutes was closer to what the Outer Zone actually needed than anything her advisors had produced in the 18 months they had been working on the cooperation agreement expansion. She picked up her notes. She said she was going to have her technical staff review the joint working group proposal and that she expected to have a response within 2 weeks. She said the meeting was concluded. I stood up. She looked at me one more time across the long table with those gold eyes. She said one more thing. She said that in 30 years of governance she had found that the people who said no clearly and with good reasons were more valuable than the people who said yes easily, and that she intended to remember my name. I thanked her and walked to the door. Oren was waiting in the corridor outside, and he looked at my face and then looked at the closed meeting room door and then back at my face. He said what happened. I told him. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said that I had just told the High Sovereign of the Valdorian Compact no in a formal meeting and walked out without being removed from my posting or the cooperation agreement. I said yes. He said that had never happened before. I said I knew. He said, what did she say? I told him about the alternative proposal and the 2-week review and the thing she had said about Pio, who said no clearly and with good reasons. He was quiet again for a moment. Then he said that I should probably write up the alternative proposal in full before the 2-week review, because if her technical staff were going to respond to it, they should respond to the complete version and not just the outline I had given in a meeting. I said I would do it on the transit back. He said, how long would it take? I said about 40 minutes. He looked at me with the expression of someone who had drawn a short straw and found something unexpected on the other end of it. Then he said, well done. He said it simply, and I believed he meant it. I wrote the full proposal on the transit back and filed it before I landed and went back to my station work, because there was a signal pattern in Sector 7 that I had been meaning to look at, and the day was not finished yet. 2 weeks later, a response came from the Valdorian Compact Technical Office. They had reviewed the joint working group proposal. They had identified 3 areas where they wanted to discuss specifics further. They were ready to begin. I read it twice. Then I wrote back and said I was ready too, and I was. I always was.